Is this the end of Airbnb? I mean, it certainly seems like it with New York's new short-term rental rules in place. Check this out.
New York beginning its crackdown on rentals today, and this could be a biggie. Robert Frank is here to discuss.
Yeah, Kelly, maybe it's 10,000 doors closing when you talk about Airbnb.
Wow.
They have about 40,000 listings. Some say it's going to be 10,000, maybe over 20,000 listings that disappear after today, because today marks the first day that New York will start enforcing this new law, which Airbnb says is a de facto ban on Airbnb. So what it says is you have to be present if you're renting out your apartment. You can't just rent out a whole apartment and not be there. And so that's what a lot of people do. So you can't do that.
You come to New York, you get an Airbnb, and the owner's not there.
The owner's not there. That's what makes it great. The other problem is that you have to register with the city. Now, so far, the city has only approved 250 applications. There are tens of thousands of listings out there. So just to get it approved is difficult. The city doesn't have the staff to approve them. But also, there are all these building regulations that you have to go through to get approval.
So what are your thoughts on Airbnb, guys? Me personally, I sort of just kind of like stopped using it because it just wasn't a good price most of the time anymore. I mean, it's okay for some one-off unusual rentals or maybe for a big house for a large group, but traveling as a couple for short stays, it just costs more than the hotels these days for a less reliable experience. But what do you guys think? So the new rules governing short-term stays booked via Airbnb, VRBO, and similar platforms in New York City could have broader consequences for the vacation rental industry, not to mention your local housing market. And if you think about it, this thing could spread. In fact, this as more and more travelers are once again favoring traditional hotels over residential style listings. The change, which Airbnb has called a de facto ban, is one of the most significant moves a major city has made in recent years to curtail short-term rentals, coming after New Orleans issued new restrictions of its own in March. Now, depending upon what happens in New York, other cities could easily follow suit. The rules say hosts in New York City who offer short-term rental stays must register with the city or they could face fines of up to $5,000. Now, this new rule aims to enforce the existing ban on rentals of less than 30 days unless the host is present and with a maximum of 2 guests. Now, another noteworthy rule, hosts and other visitors must leave the doors inside the dwelling unlocked so occupants can access the entire unit. Before, nearly 15,000 hosts offered short-term Airbnb rentals across the city, but by August 28th, the city had only approved 257 out of the 3,250 applications. Of course, Airbnb is saying that New York City's new short-term rental rules will harm its tourism economy and the livelihoods of thousands of New Yorkers and small businesses, particularly in the outer boroughs, who depend on home sharing and tourism income. On the flip side, some critics argue that the city is bowing to the hotel industry's pressure and limiting affordable options for visitors. But I think you guys can agree with me here. There's 2 sides to the story. Some argue that they reduce the availability and drive up housing costs because landlords choose platforms like Airbnb over renting to locals. Plus, short-term rental guests can get rowdy and disruptive, so locals prefer them stay in proper hotels rather than residential apartment buildings. Supporters of the rule believe it will free up apartments for New Yorkers dealing with high rents and housing shortages. On the other hand, small-time landlords worry it will eliminate a flexible source of extra income without significantly impacting the housing supply problem. In the bigger picture, if New York City's efforts succeed without harming tourism, it could serve as a model for other cities seeking to reduce short-term rentals. Airbnb is definitely being challenged with this and other criticisms it's gotten lately, like those high fees and cleaning requirements. Many say that the fees are utterly outrageous and there is always a book of rules, regulations, and chores that are so thick you can't even enjoy your stay. That's why they're over it. Some of my friends say that Airbnb died the moment that they allowed all of these property management companies to list on their platform. Then again, Airbnb is a global booking powerhouse with strong financials, posting its most profitable Q2 on record this year as travel continues to rebound post-pandemic. New York, I don't think that they're going to have a problem with the Airbnb fallout, I have to say. New York has always been a popular tourist destination even before short-term rentals became widespread. Now sure, fewer such options might be a hassle for families looking for residential style accommodations, but may not result in much more than a blip in long-term tourism numbers. numbers. Honestly, what I'm more worried about here is these Airbnb bans could affect your local housing market. But let's get into that right now. But first, just a real quick thanks to you guys for all the support. Thank you guys so much for watching the channel, and an extra big thanks for always lighting up the like button. Really, you guys are the best. And hey, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap that notification bell. It's totally free. We're just one big happy financial freedom fam here, all right? All right, so let's get down to it. So like I said, this New York Airbnb ban has descended into pure chaos. As few as 2% of New York City's previous 22,000 short-term rentals on Airbnb have registered with the city since a new law banning most listings came into effect in early September. But the more concerning problem is that many illegal short-term rental listings are now being advertised on social media and lesser-known platforms, with some still seemingly being listed on Airbnb itself. The number of short-term listings on Airbnb has fallen by more than 80% from 22,434 in August to just 3,227 by October 1st. But just 417 properties have actually been registered with the city, meaning a lot of these listed short-term rentals actually don't have the permission to continue operating. So right now, there's this black market of short-term rentals in the city, according to Lisa Grossman. People are using sites like Facebook, Craigslist, Hoofy, and others where they can search for guests or places to book without checks and balances of booking platforms such as Airbnb or even VRBO. Yep. People are just finding ways around the rules. Many short-term rentals list themselves as exempt from the city's registration rules, but there's still a whole lot of units available for short-term stays that do not appear to be hotels or exempt units. In one listing marked as exempt, the host asks for guests to avoid interacting with the building's concierge. On another listing, a host claims they used to live in the unit but have now moved to New Jersey and now rent it out. One appears to be a row home in a mostly residential neighborhood in Brooklyn. And those listings that are left, I mean, the cleaning fees are enough to turn people back to hotels. Having to pay a fee and still be required by the host to clean before you left is something that gets under a lot of people's skin. I remember one time that the fee increased about $100 per guest per night, and that immediately outpriced the Airbnb over a hotel. Sometimes these apps, they're really just out to squeeze as much money out of you. You know what I mean? Now let's just be honest for a second here, guys, because this is so much bigger than just one city. I mean, anywhere really. If you've gone on vacation at any point in the last decade or so, you've probably rented or at least considered renting an Airbnb or VRBO. I mean, it's pretty much a symbol of our sharing economy, right? But despite a resurgence in travel spending, Airbnb's bookings haven't met the company's expectations. Hosts in popular places like Phoenix, Arizona, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Austin, Texas have watched their revenue drop by nearly 50% from May 2022 to May 2023. On forums for short-term rental owners, hosts from all over the country are saying that they're seeing fewer and fewer travelers this year compared to previous ones. Meanwhile, many airlines, cruise ships, and hotel chains are having a banner year. You may have seen those viral posts on TikTok and Twitter saying that Airbnb is on the brink of extinction. Some even predict that a wave of former short-term rentals up for grabs will flood the market. But honestly, guys, I think the truth is a little bit more complicated than that. So first, Airbnb operates differently from its individual hosts. It serves as a middleman between travelers and hosts, so vacant units don't impact the company's revenue in the same way that it would affect hosts. A case in point, Airbnb's revenue in the second quarter of 2023 exceeded expectations, even though the total number of nights booked fell short of expectations. So while some social media pundits may blame a drop in consumer demand and the profit downturn, a more plausible explanation is that hosts are feeling the effects of a different kind of squeeze. For as long as Airbnb has been in the picture, critics and advocates for affordable housing have been pushing for laws to limit the company's impact on the real estate market. So yeah, the past year, with these new rules in place in more and more cities, these advocates have seen some of their wishes granted. I mean, let's be honest here, finding affordable housing has long been a challenge for many Americans, and of course, the pandemic has only made it worse. Airbnb, along with other short-term rental apps like VRBO, make this issue worse by encouraging wealthy real estate buyers to purchase properties and list them on their platforms. This reduces the available housing stock and drives up local home prices. Now, studies have revealed that an influx of short-term listings also leads to higher local rents, especially in places like New York City, where there were once more Airbnb listings than apartments for rent. The burning question now is whether these restrictions actually help improve housing affordability. The short answer, given their relative newness, is we honestly don't know yet. There is evidence that short-term rentals increase rents, but none about these regulations providing a solution for fixing this. Looking ahead for Airbnb, short-term rental restrictions aren't necessarily a bad thing for hosts. Surprisingly, around 80% of Airbnb's top 200 markets already have some form of short-term rental regulations in place. Airbnb also points to examples like San Francisco, where they say despite the city's strict rules, the number of short-term rentals increased by 22%. Interestingly, in some parts of the country, the recent drop in short-term rental revenue might be due to regulations that may be too lenient. Back in 2016, Arizona passed a law that's essentially the opposite of Airbnb restrictions. It prohibits cities and towns in the state from limiting the number of short-term rentals. As a result, Phoenix had over 20,000 short-term rental units at the beginning of 2023, and the intense competition has left many of them vacant for weeks. This led to a nearly 50% year-over-year drop in Airbnb host revenue in May. So these restrictions can actually benefit some Airbnb hosts. Less competition means more travelers are likely to find and book your property, hopefully leaving you positive reviews. This is especially advantageous for hosts who can adapt to these market conditions, like those who bought their properties when mortgage rates were at record lows. Now, as for all the social media forecasters predicting a flood of affordable Airbnb listings on platforms like Zillow, I don't think that potential homebuyers should get their hopes up. Hosts negatively affected by short-term rental restrictions have the option to shift their properties to longer-term rentals instead of selling them at a loss. They don't have to sit idle with their assets. Sometimes you've got to look at the big picture with these things. That's why we have this channel. All your financial updates and breakdowns all in one convenient place. Right, guys? I'll see you on the next one.